Hello, my name is Tucker. Ever since I was a little kid playing on my PS3 with my dad, I've always dreamed of becoming a game designer. Now, I'm 18 and just finished my first year at college studying game design. As much as people have told me that it isn't worth my time, I've actually learned a lot. I learned a lot about the industry and how things work, how it's important to work in a team and be open to new ideas, how it's important to think from the player's perspective and receive feedback on your game, how to program with C#, and just how much work goes into making a game. Over the course of the semester, I've made a few projects that I'm proud of, but over the summer, I want to push myself to do something that will really put my skills to the test. I started thinking about some small ideas I could work with, and I settled on one that I really like. I started drafting up a GDD, which stands for Game Design Document. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a giant document containing every single aspect of the game so that your team can reference it during development. However, since I'm going to be working solo, I would just use it so I don't forget anything while developing, or change my vision. After writing for about an hour, the project slowly evolved from a small game to a decently large game. I was thinking that I may have overscoped a little bit, but then I kind of just said screw it. This is a personal project that I'll be developing in my spare time, and I wouldn't be spending money on it, so let's just go for it. My idea is to make a pixel RPG with a unique mechanic that involves turn-based combat mixed with real-time actions. It's different enough for most RPGs to be considered at least somewhat unique. No other game to my knowledge has a system exactly the same as mine, though there are similar ones. What I am especially excited about though is the game's story. I won't say much about it because if the game ends up becoming a reality, I want players to experience it for themselves. What I will say for now is that it's about finding a lost friend. So as I was writing down the basics of the plot, I decided that I should stop on the document for now. In school, we learned about these things called rapid prototypes. A rapid prototype is used to test the mechanics of a game before they are finalized in multiple ways. The first way is to see if mechanics are fun, but the developers also have to test if the mechanics they are working on can actually be handled on the systems they're programming for. They also have to see if they can actually program it. In my case, I'm not a super good programmer, so I want to see if I can actually program the different aspects of my game. However, I am doing this because I do wish to see if the mechanics are fun as well. I know for sure that most, if not all, systems can handle the game because it's 2D, right? So I'm not really concerned with testing that. First, I started working on the assets. While I believe I am a decent artist, I still want to make sure that I have the capabilities to draw all the art for my game. I drew a tile map for the starting area of the game, which would be the player's house. For those who don't know what a tile map is, it's basically a grid sheet of drawings that the developer uses to make the map that the player explores in a 2D game. I'm making my game in Unity because that's what we learned in our program, and for now, I would rather use an engine that I'm used to than learning a new programming language, even though I have some experience in Unreal already. I put the sprites into the project and began drawing a map. I hooked up the collision for the walls and objects, so that when I made the player, they could not walk through certain objects and walls. Speaking of the player, my first objective in the prototype was to create player movement. I started programming a C# script and attached it to a white square. This square was the player at the time. The player movement worked great, but for some reason they wouldn't bump into walls. After a lot of trial and error, I finally got it working, but there was a problem. Player would spin around like crazy when bumping into stuff. After even more trial and error, I realized that there was a button I could press to stop this from happening, and I felt kinda dumb, but player movement was finished. Next, I made it my objective to make sprites and animations for the players. A sprite, in my case, is a drawing used in the game somehow. I drew a little character and made some animations for it. This would be our player character. I did some math and animation stuff in Unity, and they were kind of working. After reorganizing my entire code and doing some more math, it did work. I don't know why they were moving so fast though. I changed some more things in my code, and then it finally worked as intended. I didn't like how the animations looked with the floating movement, so I changed it so it would stop moving as soon as the player let go of the keys. Then I realized there was some problems with the animations. First, the shoulder bouncing on the character looked very weird to me. Second, I'm colorblind, and I didn't realize that the skin was green. I got a friend to help me with the color. I also showed the game to my best friend Hannah, and after telling her about my ideas, we realized that the player kinda looked like her. Well, sort of, in a weird pixelated way. So I decided to just make her the character. Because of this, I wanted to change the color of her hair and her shirt to match her style more. After editing my sprite sheet and drawing a lot, I imported the updated sprite sheet into Unity. Player movement was finally done. My next task was to make combat, and I would say that this was probably the most difficult thing to make in the prototype. I started with drawing the assets and sprites in Photoshop. I made a console with some buttons, and then made the first enemy of the game. The tutorial enemy would be a bunny. While drawing it, I started realizing that players probably wouldn't want to kill such a cute and cuddly creature. I thought back to The Last of Us 2, specifically the development of the game. Naughty Dog said that players didn't want to kill the dogs, and that they had to make them more aggressive so players would actually feel the need to kill them. So I did something on a similar line, although I'm not going to show it till later. I put the bunny in the game and started animating. Then I drew the background for the first combat area and put that in Unity. Now it was time to start programming. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, but off camera I made a main menu for the game. It wasn't originally planned to be in the prototype, but I decided to make it as a sort of proof of concept / concept art, just for fun. Going back to combat though, I made these areas on the map that are called danger areas. Basically, when the player walks around in one of these areas for too long, an enemy will attack them and bring them into combat. My plan is to make each danger area make the player fight a different enemy, depending on how far they are or how leveled up they are in the game. But I realized that transitioning into combat instantly was way too jarring, so I made a seamless scene transition, and I'm actually pretty proud of it. Then I started programming the console to work. I made it so the player can run away from combat if they want, but it's based on a random number generator, which means the player will have to be lucky. See, look. Oh, one sec. There, I got it. Then I started working on blocking. On the enemy's turn, the player would have to perform a real-time action to parry the enemy's attack. Parry too early, and you negate half the damage. Parry too late, and you take full damage. But parry at just the right time, and you'll damage the enemy. This system forces the player to make crucial decisions in intense moments of the game. They have to decide if they're going to block and negate some of the damage, or attempt to parry and risk taking full damage. I will also eventually implement a system where the player has to block based on the direction of the attack. But for the bunny, I'm only going to make it so it has one attack, so it doesn't really matter for now. I drew some hands in Photoshop, and then animated them in Unity. And bam, they were ready. I also implemented the bunny's attack. I think when they see its head contort into a gaping mouth, they will feel the need to fight it. Before I show you the blocking animations, I also finished the player's attacking motion. When the player presses the attack button, their fist will appear and they will have to move the mouse to hit the enemy. Right now it looks a little weird, but I'll make it better. I chose this system because I feel it has a lot of things the player can customize throughout their playthrough. I plan to make it so players can upgrade individual stats of their character and change their weapons. Changing weapons can modify a lot about the attack action. First, the sprite of the fist could change to a sword or something else. Second, weapons could have different weights, and therefore are harder or slower to move. Different weapons could also change the window the player has to attack before the enemy does, and also change how much damage the player does. I plan to allow players to customize these stats depending on their level. It adds a lot of customization to fit the player's build. I'm also going to make it so players can customize their magic stats and their running away stats. However, I'm not going to program any of this right now in the prototype, but rather save it for the final build of the game. I'm really excited to see what players end up doing with this though. After a lot of programming, it was finally finished. I think it looks pretty good for now, but I plan on changing some of the UI and adding damage numbers so the player can see how much damage they are doing, along with how much damage they've taken. The last thing to do was to make a death screen. I wanted to feel sad and fill the player with a sense of emptiness for not completing their mission. I decided to make a light shining down on Hannah's lost shoe, and I wrote a message that seemed shallow and depressing. Hannah never made it to the lighthouse. With that, combat was finished. My last objective of the demo was to make a working dialogue system. I made a dialogue console in Photoshop along with some portraits, loosely inspired by Hannah's real face. I haven't shown her these yet, and if she wants me to change them for some reason, I will. So don't take this as the final version. But I do think the progression in the drawing is really funny. She started out looking like Giga Chad, but I think the final product is pretty good. I imported these sprites in Unity and began programming. In class, we started using this narrative scripting software called Ink, which allows the user to write dialogue and integrate it into Unity. I looked up some tutorials on how to use it because my knowledge was a little rusty, but I got the hang of it pretty quickly. I spent about 3 days programming the system, with a lot of headaches and bugs, but eventually, I got it working pretty well. However, I couldn't figure out how to get the mouse working with the dialogue choices after I set up keyboard control, so I think I might just leave it. It is a little inconsistent though because the combat buttons are controlled via mouse, but I don't think it's too big of a deal. I've seen many games have inconsistencies like this, and have still been wildly successful. Plus, this doesn't actually hinder the gameplay, it's just kind of strange that the mouse controls combat, but the keyboard controls dialogue. But oh well, I don't think it's a big deal. I made a rectangle and made it interactable. This is for now our mom NPC. I don't have portraits made for her or animations, but I am gonna make them in the future. I will work on this in the next video. But for now, I think that dialogue is pretty much done. And with that, so is the prototype. I'm really excited to see what this project will turn into, and I hope you'll follow me for the ride. This is my first attempt at making a full game, so wish me luck. I've already outlined some tasks that I'll need to complete in the next video. First, I need to finish the game design document. Then, I'm gonna begin working on the first area of the game, which is the player's house and backyard. So, I hope you'll join me then. It will be a while for the video to release because the prototype took me a month, and honestly, who knows when I'll be done this video. But for now, have a nice day, and I'll see you next time, hopefully.